Colonel Terry VIRTS is one of only 4 ever astronauts to pilot the NASA space shuttle, fly on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft, and perform spacewalks. In this session, he'll discuss how his education prepared him for spending over 200 days at the International Space Station. Before we invite him out, let's watch a short video. Please welcome our speaker, Mr. Terry VIRTS, NASA astronaut and author of View from Above. Moderating for us for this session is Mr. Peter Lewis, presenter of Money Talk, RTHK Radio 3.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the next discussion. It's the Yidan Summit 2018, and I think you're going to enjoy this. This summit is about education and how education can transform your own life, act as a positive force for others, and propel society forward. And as you can see from the extraordinary photographs and videos that you've just seen, space is a topic that stimulates our thirst for knowledge and desire to know and understand more. So I would like to introduce you to the person who took those amazing photos and embodies all of those ideals we aim for in education. He's a former NASA astronaut who has piloted the NASA space shuttle, flown on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft, and performed spacewalks. Please welcome Colonel Terry VIRTS.
Thanks, Peter.
So Terry, can we kick off with the young Terry? How did this all begin?
Well, you know, the first book I read when I was in kindergarten, I was probably about 5 years old, was about Apollo. It was one of those cardboard books with 1 sentence per page. And I can remember as a young boy seeing these astronauts go to the moon and just being amazed that people could actually do that. So from a very young age, I grew up wanting to be an astronaut. My room was full of pictures of airplanes and galaxies. My parents, my mom never went to college, my dad never went to college, but they supported me, they believed in me, and they encouraged me to do things like learn how to do photography, learn how to computer program. They bought me a small TRS-80, one of those old computers. And so I was lucky. I didn't grow up necessarily, I grew up very middle-class America, but I had parents that supported me, and that meant a lot.
So, when you told people that you wanted to be an astronaut as a young kid, what did they say?
They were, I mean, that's crazy. Nobody actually gets to be astronauts. But when I was a teenager, The Right Stuff came out. If you've ever seen the movie or read the book, it's one of the best books about space of all time. And it talked about the original guys back in the 50s, Chuck Yeager and the Mercury astronauts, and how they went on to be test pilots and then astronauts. So that kind of inspired me. First of all, I wanted to fly, and second of all, it was a path to be an astronaut. So that's what got me into going to the Air Force Academy and being a pilot, and always wanting to be an astronaut, but never really thinking it was possible. But I learned a really important lesson, and that is don't tell yourself no, because it's so easy to tell yourself no and to say that's a crazy dream, no one's going to get that. And if you say no, that's impossible, you won't get it. But if you, whatever gift or talent you've been given, if you pursue it, it might work out. You'll have a good journey along the way trying to work hard to get there. And if it doesn't, you can maybe figure out a different way. But so many people, I think, get discouraged as young people or as old people taking themselves out of whatever dream or gift that they've been given.
That seems to be a common characteristic of people like yourself who've achieved things, of
Right.
entrepreneurs, of the educator laureates that
Yes.
we've seen this morning. People say you can't do that. That'll never work.
Right.
You're crazy. How would you sort of overcome? Because it can be quite dispiriting, quite
Yes.
discouraging, can't it? How do you overcome that?
I was told that my whole life, you're not, these other guys are smarter than you, these other guys are better looking than you. And it was just one of those things you have to believe in yourself and say, yeah, you're probably right, and then just quietly, go for it. Also, the bigger the dream, the bigger the thing that you want to achieve, the harder the work. It's one thing to say, I want to be a doctor. Well, you're not just going to be a doctor. There's a lot of work that has to go into getting there. So you have to be realistic and I could say, I want to be a footballer in the World Cup, but that's not me, right? There's some things that you just can't do. But being a pilot was a realistic thing, and even astronaut was realistic. So you have to kind of take stock of where you're at and what gifts you've been given. And then if you want to do something big, you're going to have to put in the work. The harder you work, I think the luckier you get.
So having it grounded in realism, but also you mentioned earlier you had very supportive parents.
I did,
That must be
yeah.
a crucial element in achieving as you go through your younger life,
Yes.
the things you want to do.
Having parents or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, an adult that believes in a kid, or a teacher, as we're here talking about education, people need someone to believe in them. Even adults need people to believe in them. And without that, you're not going to get anywhere. That's really, really, I think, one of the key pieces of success in education and in life is having someone that believes in you.
And your education as you grew up, was you a smart kid?
I did well, obviously, in school, but I was never the smartest kid. I was never the top guy. Actually, as I was leaving NASA 2 years ago, one of my final duties was to go through 18,000 applications. And there's a lot of smart people that apply to become astronauts at NASA. And some of them were like number one here, number one there, perfect grades, top graduate. And those people, sometimes I'm a little nervous about that, I kind of want people who have failed and overcome and I was that kid. I was never the number one at everything.
But you had an education which
I
was
did.
an important element in terms of later on being able to go and achieve what you wanted to do. How significant was that for you?
So education, people say, well, how long did your training take to be an astronaut? And the reality is, it took my whole life. I mean, it really, really, really was a lifetime. I had to go through pilot training as an Air Force pilot. There was lots of education I did. Test pilot school was like a master's degree. Going to NASA was a continuous years and years and years of training. Learning the Russian language was one of many things that we had to do, but that takes a lifetime in and of itself. So I think to be successful, not only astronaut, but really at anything, you have to be willing to adapt and learn. Because when you're 20, whatever you learn in college is not what you're going to be doing probably when you're 30, and certainly not when you're 60. You have, especially in today's world. In the old days, if you could pick a career and do that one thing until you retired. If you want to, have a dynamic career, that's not possible. So you have to be able to learn and be educated your entire life.
And in terms of the background that you had, you come from a relatively poor family. Does that help you keep you grounded today after you've had a lot of success and you've done a lot of the things that you want to do? Do you think back to that and remember those childhood days and where you come from?
Yeah, it's important to remember where you came from. And it's funny, people always say, well, when are normal people going to get to go to space? And I kind of look around, I'm like, well, obviously normal people haven't been to space yet. But, I wasn't born into the royal family of astronauts. I wasn't dedicated from childhood to do that. But it's a really, really, really small group of people who have been lucky enough to go into space. And I respect that and I acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, I grew up, I am who I am. I'm going home to visit my parents in a couple weeks. It's important to remember where you came from.
And tell me a little bit about NASA, because you was growing up at a time when the moon missions were just starting, when America was just starting to first send people to the moon. Can you tell me a little bit about what we can learn from that, the sort of things that NASA went through at that time in terms of making those space trips successful?
Yeah. You know, I think the moon missions that NASA had.
I think we might need a handheld microphone for you.
There we go. Now you can hear me.
There
Okay.
it goes. Yep.
I think the Apollo program in America, it was similar to in the Soviet Union. There was Yuri Gagarin, and they had a robust space program. And now in China, they have, Yang Liwei, they have a very robust space program. Those national movements show that you can do great things as a people. It takes a lot of people, resources. I think the two most important things are to have a vision. If you don't have that vision, you don't know where you're going. But Thomas Edison said that vision without action is like hallucination. In other words, I think what that means is words are cheap. It's easy to say stuff, but then you have to back it up with an actual program and resources, and you have to stick to it. And that's not easy to do. During the Apollo days, America was able to do that. President Kennedy gave his vision. We're going to land on the moon by 1969, and we did it. And so I think and you can take that paradigm and apply it to education. We're going to get a certain percentage of the kids educated to this level. We're going to have higher education and vocational education, or whatever the vision you have. You have to have the vision, and then you have to have the strategy to actually get there, and then you have to stick to it. And any one of those things is hard to do, but all three of them is exceptionally hard to do. And if you do it, then you'll be successful, and you'll make society-changing impacts.
And that's true in many walks of life, isn't
Right.
it? In terms of business, for example, in terms
yes.
of education, as we're talking about here today.
Your family, anything like that. So yes, the Apollo paradigm is really interesting, and we went to the moon, which I think is pretty cool. But the lessons learned from that can be applied to anything.
And where does innovation fit in? Obviously,
Right.
Particularly in terms of going to space, you really can't plan for every possible
Right.
eventuality, can you? However good your strategy may be, sometimes you just need to take a chance, see what works, what happens.
That's right. The way that we went to the way we went to the moon wasn't just the Apollo program. It was Mercury, and then Gemini, and then Apollo. So we went through a build-up approach. And I think that's important if you're revamping your educational system, or if you're having a tech startup or whatever. You start small, do a demonstration, make sure it can work, and then Gemini was a testing and development program. It was, let's figure out all the things that we need to go to the moon. Rendezvous, having 2 spaceships docked together, doing spacewalks, having multiple people fly. And then Apollo was the final thing. So it wasn't just go to the moon, it was really a build-up, deliberate approach. I call it a strategy of innovation, and that lesson can be learned for education or business or any other human endeavor that you're doing.
And do you have any memorable times where things didn't work out, where there were emergencies that you had to suddenly deal with?
So the book that I have out is called View from Above. It'll actually be in Chinese language this summer. And chapter 5 is about this particular emergency that we had. It's an ammonia leak, which is actually the most dangerous emergency. Ammonia is a very deadly chemical. It's the coolant fluid that we use. And it was an example, really, of cooperation between the U.S. and Russia. We worked together very well to help us survive, because I was in space with Russians during a period that was not great. The last few years have not been good between the West and Russia. And I was flying in space right in the middle of that with Russian cosmonauts. So it's a really cool story. The technical emergency isn't what's important. It's the human cooperation that was what was important.
So how do you cope with the unexpected when things like that happen? I mean, presumably you can't plan for every possible emergency that might occur.
Well, so you have to know your procedures. As a pilot, if there's an emergency, if the engine fire light comes on, you have to know what to do. And then you have to work very flexibly. As a leader, I had a very experienced crew. Gennady Padalka had been in space for 879 days. He's the human with more time than anybody else. So I had this really experienced crew when I was commander. And I'm not directive with them. We work collaboratively. Hey, here's a problem. How do we solve it? We work together until the emergency light goes on. And then when that thing goes on, then it's directive. Hey, do this, do that. And so as a leader, I had to know what situation we were in. And sometimes you're collaborative and sometimes you're directive. Sometimes you're a leader, sometimes you're a follower. And I think that applies in space, but it also applies in business and everything else.
So teamwork obviously is another important aspect of this. This is not just you, is it? There's a whole team, I presume, behind you making this happen.
Yeah, especially spaceflight, but really any big human endeavor, teamwork is going to be very important.
And how do you find the right team in something like this?
So, well, on the International Space Station, there's an American, there's NASA, there's the Russian Space Agency, there's the Europeans. Within Europe, each country has their own interests. There's Canada, there's Japan. It's a big international cooperation. So it's not like one boss gets to make the team. Each country kind of throws teammates in. So you're kind of thrown together as a team, which can work out well or it can work out less well, right? It depends on the group. I was very lucky that the team that I had was really good. One of my goals when I was commander was to still be friends when it was all over, and that worked out for us.
And how do you go about motivating and encouraging that team as the leader, as the commander of the expedition?
So one of the things I did, on the way the station is set up, there's a Russian segment, and we call it the American segment, but it's really the everybody else segment. America, Europe, Japan, everybody. And so it would be very easy for us to work on our side and them to work on their side and never spend time together. And I made an effort every day. At the end of the day, I would grab a Ziploc, put my little food bags in, and go down to the Russian segment and have dinner with those guys. So I tried to spend time with them. During the week, you're busy. But on the weekends, we would go and spend like Friday nights together. And they would teach me, Russian language phrases. And so I tried to do things above and beyond just work. The work's important. Of course, you have to get the...
I think we'll probably need
my head at the right angle here.
We'll try a handheld mic. There we go.
Thank you. Okay, how's that? That's better. So I would do things outside of the normal work hours, like just learning basic phrases, spending time eating together, and I think that went a long way to building the relationships so that when the ammonia leak went off, we handled that really well. We had a team built up. But you have to invest in building your team, because if you don't, then at the end of the day, you're just going to have a group of individuals and not a team.
And are you all still friends today?
We are, actually. Yeah, we text each other and email each other sometimes. We don't see each other very much because we live in every corner of the world now. But yeah, my crew from Expedition 43 stayed friends. It was great.
Now tell us about your first spacewalk. That must be the most exhilarating thing ever. What was that like?
So I thought I had done a lot of things. I was a F-16 pilot, and I'd been a space shuttle pilot and done a rendezvous. But when you go outside in space, it was not like anything I had ever done before. You're in this big, bulky suit. It's about 200 kilograms. It's big, and it's hard to move in. And there's a little thin piece of plastic, and on the other side of that plastic is death, right? I mean, it's outer space. And so the first thing I did, I went out, and you have a little tether, and I put the tether on the handrail, and I just let go. And I could see Earth going by. I just wanted to kind of mentally, okay, I'm not going to fall, everything's good. And then my other crewmate came out, and we look each other over, make sure his suit's in good shape, his equipment's good, and then you go to your work site. And there was a shortcut. I could basically reach over to the other side of your chair, about that far, about the length of my arm, and it saved a couple minutes. If I could reach over and do that, I could go, or I'd have to crawl over to the edge of the stage and then crawl back, and it would take an extra 2 or 3 minutes. So I looked him over. I'm good. You're good. All right, let's go. And I started to reach out, and I said, nope, I'm not going to do that. And I just stayed on the station, and I took the full way. So I wasn't afraid, but I really respected being outside in space, because like I said, there's that little thin piece of plastic, and that's all there is.
And I thought jumping off the top board of the swimming pool was hard.
That's hard too.
How do you prepare for something like this? I mean, does this take a lot of training, a lot of preparation?
Well, yeah, the technical spacewalking takes a lot of training. We spend a lot of time in a pool underwater, going through the what tools you have, plugging the drill in, moving the boxes of equipment around. That stuff takes a lot of training, and everything has a tether on it, so there's all these strings and cords and tethers, and just managing all that. If you don't pay attention for a minute, you're tangled, and it ruins your entire day. So you really have to, not only is it physically difficult, but it's mentally really draining. But that's just the technical side. It's the mental side of, you're in outer space, and you have to stay focused. And so I was a test pilot. I didn't think I was going to have a problem, but that's why I did that first thing. That's why I put the thing down, I let go, just to make sure that mentally, all right, I'm good. I just wanted to have that first task, all right, I'm good, and then we can spend the next 6.5 hours.
So there you are, floating in space. You see a perspective of the Earth that very, very few people have ever seen. Does it change your perspective of humanity and our place on the planet when you see the world from above?
You know, when you do a spacewalk and when you do a space mission, 99% of your time is work. I mean, there's so much work to do. It's a constant list of tasks, and you need to fix this piece of equipment, and you need to plug in this experiment, and I need to go to here, and I need to do the tether, and it's just nothing but work. Except every once in a while, you get this view of the universe that's just sublime. And I can remember on one spacewalk, I had just a few seconds, and I had a few seconds, so I stopped, and I kind of turned around and I looked, and in the background was this sunrise that you can't imagine. Like, honestly, you can't imagine it unless you've seen it. And I thought, it felt like I was hearing from God, like I was seeing creation. Like, this is what God sees when he made the universe. And then I had to get back to work because I had to plug in this cable. You know, it was like that. It really was that level of swing. And it was really powerful to see just how awesome the universe is. And I think that hopefully I'm less of a black and white person having seen, the universe. But I think that also gave me some perspective to realize just the bigger picture and not be so stressed out by by the noise, in our iPhones and Twitter and Weibo and whatever else we have. It's just constant noise, continuously taking our attention away from, sometimes you can see creation, and sometimes you have to do that step back.
And when you look down on our planets, can you see the bigger picture? Do you see things that sort of really highlight maybe some of the issues that we're facing and we talk about a lot today?
Yes. So a lot of times you'll hear astronauts say, when you look back on Earth, you don't see borders. And that's actually mostly true. The name of the IMAX film I helped make was called Beautiful Planet, and it really is a beautiful planet. I mean, the Earth is beautiful. You could see some environmental problems. You could see pollution in certain parts and also deforestation in certain parts.
So you can see evidence of climate change.
So climate change, you need a spreadsheet and a few decades to see. You can't see change by definition, right? You're just looking at a point in time. But you could see pollution, which causes it. But for the most part, the Earth's a beautiful planet. The same thing, you don't see many borders, but there's a few places that you can see borders. Looking back, you can see economic activity. East Asia is bright. I mean, there's a lot of lights on here. The economic development in this part of the world is just, everybody here we are in the middle of that, right? We know that. Europe and America, lots of lights on, lots of economic activity. Africa, there's almost no lights on. I mean,
and it's that stark. There are whole areas of the planet that are dark.
It's dark. And so you could really see global wealth from space, which I didn't expect. That really shocked me. It took me a few nights of looking at the planet before finally I realized that I wasn't looking at population, I was looking at wealth, which was kind of a profound, thing to see from space. And the same thing, like I said, you don't see most borders, but there's a few military borders that really, the India-Pakistan border. For several months, I was wondering what that river, I was like, why is that river glowing? There must be some algae or something in it. Well, it's not glowing river, it's lights on the border. And it's the same thing between North and South Korea. That border is of all the human existence that you can see from space, North and South Korea is bright. Seoul and South Korea, China, bright lights, and just black hole where North Korea is. So you can really see some people living in the light, some people living in the dark.
So when you see all of this, does it sort of prompt you to want to go out and tell the world we've got to change our attitude to this planet and how we look after it?
I think it does. Of course, the environment's important. You see this little thin blue line, and that's our atmosphere. And on the other side of that are billions and billions of stars, but like there's nowhere else that we can live. This planet we're on is the only one that we have. And more than that, I think it's the human aspect of it. I mean, people, at the end of the day, people are what's important. And there seems to be this really disturbing trend in the world in so many places that I hope can get reversed. I think we really need to do that so that we can focus on working together rather than, fear. This seems to be like this global trend towards fear and what divides us. And I don't think, in the long run, I think we'll all be better off if we don't have that.
So when you see the world from a different perspective, I presume, not to be too political, but you don't have time for too much nationalism and each person for themselves and each country for themselves.
You see it, just how silly and ridiculous it is. I mean, there I was working with my Russian friends or my Russian brother. Hey, let's just stay alive and not worry about all the silliness down on the planet.
So now you've retired. Did you have to? Do you get to a certain point where they say, you can't do any more, or
No.
was it your choice?
I was actually fairly young. When I left, I was one of not the younger guys, but there was lots of folks older than me. I just got to a point. I had been at NASA for 16 years. I had been a shuttle pilot. I'd been a station commander. I did spacewalks. I just wanted to do other things in life. I want to speak, and this is my new career, is speaking. I wanted to go share these lessons I learned. The space stories are cool. I love rockets. I love planets. I love spaceships. But it's the stories about people on Earth, I think, that are a lot more profound and important. And I didn't expect it. But like I said, when I flew in space, I wasn't thinking about that stuff. But that's what I saw. Those are the lessons I learned. So I wanted to go kind of actively, on my own terms, make this next phase of my life without just kind of hanging around hoping to get one more mission 5 years down the road or whatever.
So you've achieved one of the dreams. What's the next dream? What inspires you? What motivates you now?
One of the things that I really want to do is make a television program. So I saw the planet from space, and I want to go visit different places and explore them and climb their mountains and dive their coral reefs, whatever is in that local area. Do that, eat the food, and most importantly, meet the people. And the goal of the show will be, at the end of the day, is just to meet people around the world and realize that people are people.
And do you have people that are sort of you admire at the moment and think, I would like to maybe follow in their footsteps or do some of the things they've done?
That's a great question. There's a TV program that I think of, as Anthony Bourdain had one, where he went around, he met people through food. And I think that was a great one. I don't know if admire is probably the wrong word, but I love the Top Gear show, these crazy British guys that they do the car thing. So hopefully our show's a little bit fun like that too.
So to bring this all full circle, where we started from, on education, if you look back now, the education that you sort of had, how has that helped prepare you now to go through everything that you've seen, 200 days in space and all the many other things that you've done?
Whenever I've had a chance, I've gone back to my high school teachers and told them about how much I appreciated them. And each one you have for one class for 1 year, and it's just a part of your life, but they really did impact me. My math teacher, my French teacher was probably one of the most profound impacts that I ever had. And I ended up minoring in French. I went to school in France. And the reason I got picked to be an astronaut is because I had been an exchange student, because I had international experience. Most Americans don't. Most Americans just stay in America, and I was one of the few that had been out. And I'm sure as a high schooler, I wasn't particularly good at it, and she never in a million years would have thought. But her class literally changed my life. I wouldn't be here if it were not for her having a fun French class. Now my daughter's taking French. I just took her on a trip to France. She's made a multi-generational impact in my life. And several teachers have been like that. And I think you don't ever realize, especially if you're teaching kids, like you're teaching 10-year-olds or 15-year-olds, you don't know what they're going to become when they're 30, 40, 50-year-old. But you're going to impact. Whatever they become will be in part because of what you did as a teacher. So I like to share that. I think for me, I was probably the least likely to write a book, I'm sure. I was a bad English student. I tortured my English teachers. And I'm an author now. Like, I wrote the book. I didn't have a ghost writer. I wrote it myself. And I've got a few other books in my brain. And I've really kind of converted to writing. And I'm sure my English teachers would be shocked. Well, they were shocked when I told them. So, yeah.
What a great ambassador for what can be done and what can be achieved.
Yeah. Yes.
Terry VIRTS, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. This was great.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we have time for any questions? I don't know if we have. If you, maybe we can take a couple of questions. Oh. No. Okay. Apparently we run out of time.
Over time. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay.